Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we have something a bit different, a really unique mission, actually. We're not just analyzing a novel.
No, we're going deeper. It feels like we're dissecting the very architecture of truth itself.
Exactly. How fiction, when it's built with real intellectual rigor, can become this incredibly precise tool. A tool to expose some brutal, documented realities.
And the source material we have is perfect for this. We've got this stack centered on Zayvon Vardanyan's novel, The Brazilian Parrot. It's tight, it's provocative.
Yeah, and the author himself calls it a blend, a seamless blend, he says, of political psychological drama and documentary prose.
That blend is absolutely key. And our sources, they basically give us the complete blueprint. We have the novel's structure, the chapter list.
Which is useful context.
Definitely. But crucially, we have this really in-depth interview with Vardanyan, and he just lays it all out, his creative process, the specific real-life people behind his characters.
Which is always fascinating.
Totally. And he outlines the philosophical core, the real weight behind the story, especially his critique of, well, selective modern activism. That comes through loud and clear.
Okay, so the hook here, for you listening, is really the structural genius behind it all. We're going to uncover how actual real people become fictional characters.
Like the prototypes for Peter, Tamine, and Betty, some surprises there.
And maybe the most counterintuitive part, how actual mathematical logic ends up dictating the emotional reality of pain and recovery in the story.
It sounds strange, but it makes a kind of profound sense when he explains it. It's an intellectual tightrope walk, for sure.
It really is. And by the end of this deep dive, you'll get it. You'll understand the origins of these key characters, how the author used, believe it or not, a logarithmic function to map out suffering.
And maybe more importantly, we'll really unpack his challenging thesis on, let's call it, selective Western outrage, particularly when faced with global religious persecution and violence against women.
It's a heavy stuff, but presented in such a unique way. Let's start at the beginning, though. The foundation.
Right. Where did this novel even come from? Okay, so to really get the feel of this novel, its aggressive pacing, its structure, you have to go back to its origin story.
It wasn't always a novel, right?
Exactly. It started life conceived as a film screenplay. Now, the book itself is pretty brief, maybe 150 pages or so.
But that screenplay origin explains so much.
It really does. It explains why it feels so kinetic, so visual. The author actually describes the style as a cinematographic montage.
And you see that on the page, don't you? The prose has these fragmented paragraphs sometimes, very little internal rambling, exposition.
And quick scene breaks. Bam, bam, bam.
Yeah, the whole structure feels built on voices clashing, very clear blocking of action, like stage directions almost. And this rhythm, it's almost anxious. It just pushes you forward relentlessly.
Like a really tight film edit. Cut, cut, cut. And Vardanyan said the transition, from script to book was very smooth. But then he says something really telling about his priorities.
What's that?
He says the old school book won against the newfangled cinema.
Huh. That's interesting. So it wasn't just nostalgia.
I don't think so. It sounds like a very deliberate choice. He wanted to make sure the literary stuff, the internal thoughts, the dense dialogue, the philosophical weight really took precedence. He didn't want to lose that depth just for visual speed.
So it keeps the speed of film, but insists on the reflection you get from literature. Perfectly put. And that cinematic structure, it also let him use a really interesting concept very efficiently. What he calls functional characters. Okay, functional characters. He uses that exact term.
Explicitly. These are roles designed purely to, serve the plot. They function almost like stage directions that just happen to have a human form.
So they don't need the full psychological treatment, the backstory.
Not really. Their job is functional. They appear exactly when the plot needs something specific, an action, a piece of info, and then poof, they vanish.
Right, like think about the guy in the phone store who gives Peter some tech thing.
Or the medics who show up right after the explosion at Tamina's office.
Or her assistant, Lynn. They pop in, do their thing.
And disappear. They execute a plot function, basically. They don't carry the big philosophical themes.
But here's what's interesting, the paradox you mentioned earlier.
Yes. Even though these characters are purely functional plot-wise, the author still often gave them depth, or at least based them on some real-world inspiration.
Why do that if they're just functions?
Well, it suggests that even a minor role, a brief appearance, has to feel authentic, plausible. It avoids cliché, it keeps the reader trusting the world he's built. The function has to feel real, even if the character isn't sticking around.
Okay, that makes sense. So in direct contrast to these functional roles, you have the protagonists. They carry all the ideological weight.
Absolutely. Take Tamina Garani. The author is very consciously using her to dismantle that simplistic Western stereotype of the Iranian woman.
She's not presented as just a victim.
Not at all. She's this convergence of strength, fierce intelligence, deep spirituality. She's complex, modern. Her activism is existential, not just political talking points. She embodies a cultural identity the West often just doesn't see or flattens out.
And then there's Peter Rue, the YouTube journalist. He's her foil, right? Serving a different purpose.
Completely. He's the mirror, as the author puts it. He reflects Western apathy, maybe cynicism, definitely his own personal mess, his struggle for authenticity.
He starts as the observer, the outsider.
Right, until he's violently thrown into the middle of it all. And it's only through connecting with Tamina's pain, her reality, that he starts to find some kind of purpose, some meaning.
So their dynamic, her certainty versus his confusion, that's the engine driving things forward.
That's the core conflict, yeah. Their identity struggles push the whole narrative. So building on that idea of authentic function, let's look closer at the characters who really anchor this story.
The ones based on real people.
Exactly. The author confirms the big three, Peter, Tamina, and also Betty, aren't just composite sketches. They have specific, real-life prototypes behind them.
Though adjusted, obviously, for artistic invention, as he says.
Of course, fiction needs shaping.
Yes.
But the rest, they're either those composite types or the purely functional roles we just talked about.
It's always so revealing, isn't it? Seeing how an author takes reality and molds it. Okay, let's start with Betty G. Rouse. She's interesting because she has a real prototype, but seems to function mostly in relation to Peter. That's right, the author is clear. Betty, who Peter calls Bets, is based on a real person, not synthesized, and Peter calls her his little sister.
Yeah, which highlights her dual role perfectly. On one level, she's his assistant, handling the practical stuff, the journalism logistics.
But she's more than that to him.
Much more. She's his emotional bedrock, his anchor, his rhythm, as the author puts it. She doesn't get a huge plot arc herself, but Peter, he'd be completely adrift without her grounding presence. His chaos needs her stability.
So wait, if she's based on a real person, like the main protagonists, why does she still feel largely functional in the scenes? Isn't that a bit of a contradiction?
It seems like a very conscious choice, prioritizing authenticity of feeling over plot necessity, maybe.
How do you?
By basing her on someone real, he ensures the tone of their relationship, that deep trust, the shared history, the sibling-like affection feels absolutely specific and earned. Even if the plot doesn't strictly need her to solve the mystery or have a big transformation.
Yeah, okay, so the real prototype guarantees the emotional texture feels genuine, which then makes Peter's reactions and reliance on her more believable.
Precisely. She provides that emotional foundation that lets Peter's more dramatic arc unfold without feeling forced.
Got it. Okay, speaking of deep trust, let's talk about Bob. Peter trusts him more than even himself.
Yes, Bob. Introduced as that very Robert Zaslofsky, the legend of investigative journalism.
Wait, the intro.
It sets him up immediately. He's Peter's brother-in-arms from their time in Iraq, clearly a harrowing bonding experience. In a world drowning in fake news and spin, Bob represents absolute professional integrity and personal loyalty for Peter.
And this is where we get one of those amazing little details, right? About the name Zaslofsky.
Yes. This is such a cool intellectual Easter egg woven right into the fabric of the story. The author reveals the last name, Zaslofsky, is actually an homage.
An homage to who?
To his former mathematical logic lecturer, a man named Igor Zaslofsky.
Wait, seriously. The ultimate symbol of journalistic truth and reliability in the novel is named after his old math logic professor.
Seriously, isn't that incredible?
That's a statement, isn't it? About what constitutes real truth or reliability.
It's profound, a gesture of deep gratitude embedded right in the fictional architecture. He's essentially saying that the bedrock of investigative truth, for him, is built on the same principles as rigorous logic and intellectual structure. Trust requires that kind of fidelity.
Wow, okay. So from intellectual authority, let's shift to the kind of moral authority on the ground. We meet Officer Jerry and Nurse Donna at the hospital.
Right. They arrive after the explosion, and they form this crucial tandem. They represent common sense, basically.
A counterpoint to the bureaucracy.
Exactly. They're described as a multi-layered duo embodying unlost life, wisdom, and common sense. They're the human element pushing back against the FBI agents who show up immediately.
Yeah, the FBI guys arrive with their theories, their political angles.
While Jerry and Donna are just looking at the human reality in front of them.
Let's focus on Officer Jerry for a second. He's quiet at first, just observing. But then he says something pivotal, something that just cuts through the FBI's suspicion of Peter.
He really does. He delivers the critical truth that dismantles their whole theory. He just states it plainly with the weight of years on the job.
What does he say?
He says, basically, in the face of danger, a man rushes to protect what matters most to him. Never does he shield someone he supposedly meant to blow up.
Simple observational logic.
Visceral logic, life wisdom. He's the catalyst of truth in that moment. He points out the fundamental flaw in the FBI's neat little political narrative by focusing on Peter's undeniable instinctual action. He validates Peter's choice to protect Tamina.
And then there's Donna, the nurse. She's described as the Calvary.
Yeah, saving Peter and Tamina from themselves, in a way. She represents the simple, hardworking class, but she's the one who makes the decisive strategic move.
How so?
She has this simple, uncorrupted intuition. And the author consciously gives her the key power move. While Jerry stated the psychological truth why Peter did it, Donna is the one who suggests Tamina should request joint protection from the authorities.
Ah, okay. And that's huge. It shifts their connection.
Completely. It changes their relationship from just, two people caught in the same accidental trauma to an intentional, formal, protective commitment. They're linked now, officially.
And why was it important for the author that Donna, the nurse, made that suggestion, not Jerry, the cop?
He specifically noted it was a deliberate choice to give that critical agency to the female voice. He felt Donna's advice, coming from a place of practical care, a nurse's instinct to save lives, was more compelling.
Less tied to the official power structure.
Exactly. It felt more organic, maybe less bureaucratic, coming from her. It reinforces that theme in the novel, that real life-saving wisdom often comes from these unexpected, unpretentious sources, not always from the top down.
Okay, this connects perfectly to where the novel shifts from character studies into pure, almost technical literary invention.
Right, we're talking about the craft itself now.
The author mentioned that the scenes covering Peter's physical recovery in the hospital, that long, slow journey back from the blast, were incredibly difficult to write.
Yeah, he said they were the hardest part. He needed medical advice, obviously, to make the dynamics plausible, but he didn't want the book to suddenly turn into, dry medical notes.
He had to keep the humanity, the emotion.
Exactly. And the solution he came up with, well, this is where his background really comes into play in a unique way. He used his math background.
Okay, I'm still trying to wrap my head around this.
Mm-hmm.
He literally used math.
He viewed Peter's physical healing not just as a series of events, but as a continuous function over time, like plotting it on a graph.
So he's calculating the healing curve. From point A, Peter's shattered after the explosion.
Lying on his stomach, couldn't move.
Right. To point B, which is him almost fully recovered 6 years later, that's a long time.
A very long time. And modeling this mathematically, trying to make it realistic, led him to a profound discovery about the shape of recovery.
What was the shape?
It mirrored a logarithmic function.
Okay, break that down. What does a logarithmic curve look like in terms of healing? Think about it. A log function shoots up really steeply at the beginning.
Yeah.
That's the initial phase of healing, rapid, significant improvements, the stuff that gives patients and families hope.
Right.
You see progress quickly.
But then the curve flattens out dramatically. It extends into this long, long tail where progress becomes incredibly slow, almost imperceptible, and it never quite reaches the baseline. There's always a residual gap, a remaining wound.
Wow. So rapid gains followed by a severe, extended slowdown, leaving something permanent behind.
Exactly.
But doesn't that risk making the pain feel, I don't know, intellectualized, cold, calculated?
You'd think so, but the author frames it differently. It's not just about realism. It becomes a profound metaphor for human pain, for resilience, for trauma. The math provides the ethics of the suffering, if that makes sense.
The ethics.
Yeah, it ensures the pain feels earned, structurally sound, not just manipulated for dramatic effect. That 6-year slowdown, the long tail of the logarithm, that's precisely where Peter's deep psychological struggle plays out.
Because the physical healing is almost stopped, but the trauma hasn't gone away.
Exactly. The trauma lingers. He has to learn to live with that permanent residue, that pain that never fully vanishes. The mathematical structure literally dictates the shape and duration of the psychological drama. It's quite brilliant, actually.
That blend of cold logic and deep metaphor seems core to his whole approach. Let's look at another example, the hummingbird anecdote.
Ah, yes, that beautiful, slightly strange little story.
where Timena tells Peter about a hummingbird hitting her. Twice. It's this delicate moment of intimacy in the middle of all the chaos and danger.
And incredibly, that was a real event. It actually happened to her real-life prototype.
Get out, really.
Yep, the prototype told the author that story.
But he changed something crucial, didn't he? The location.
He did. In reality, the hummingbird incident happened in the prototype's courtyard, a natural setting, relatively safe.
But in the novel, where does he place it?
He moves it into the hospital room during Chapter 8, which is titled Intimacy Amidst Injury.
Okay, so taking it out of nature and putting it into this sterile, fragile life and death environment.
It amplifies the symbolism hugely, doesn't it? You contrast the poetic vulnerability of this tiny bird incident, a creature so delicate, with the stark reality of the hospital IV drips, Peter's injuries.
It makes the intimacy feel more potent, maybe more fragile too.
Exactly. And it serves as this subtle reminder of Tamina's own physical vulnerability, even while she projects such incredible spiritual strength. She, too, could be crushed like the bird. It makes their connection in that moment feel more dangerous and therefore more profound, more meaningful.
It's a masterful stroke, really.
Yeah.
Using a real anecdote, but repositioning it for maximum symbolic impact.
That seems to be his method of grounding the fiction in reality but shaping it strategically.
Okay, finally, in this section on craft, let's talk about Peter's emotional climax. His whole arc, the guilt, the impulsive bravery, the recognition of his huge mistake, it all gets distilled down, right?
Yeah, into a single, apparently unscripted sentence, something he realizes he needs to say to Tamina.
What is it? Just 2 words in English, translated from the original thought. Forgive me. Forgive me. Simple but loaded.
Completely loaded. It sums up, as the author puts it, the entire weight of a mistake, a foolish, impulsive, fatal error.
It's not just about the explosion, is it?
No, it's much bigger than that. It's an apology for his journalistic intrusion, yes, but also for his past cynicism, his recklessness, the whole chain reaction his actions set off. It's him finally acknowledging his failures, his vulnerability.
It marks his shift, doesn't it? From being that detached, maybe even narcissistic observer.
To becoming a morally responsible participant, owning his part in it all. That, forgive me, is the pivot point for his entire character.
Okay, so we've seen the craft, the structure, the character building. Now let's transition fully into the why. The urgent reality that this fiction is built upon.
Right. The novel uses these carefully constructed characters and situations as anchors to explore some incredibly heavy thematic material. This is the philosophical core of the Brazilian Parrot.
And the absolute foundation of that is religious persecution.
Specifically, the author uses Tamina's background, her identity, to shed a stark light on the brutal, ongoing reality of the Baha'i tragedy in Iran.
This is crucial context for understanding her character and the stakes.
Absolutely critical. We're talking about a community of around 300,000 people in Iran who face relentless systemic persecution. It's designed, quite literally, to eradicate their presence from Iranian society.
And the numbers are horrifying. Since the 1979 revolution, over 200 Baha'is have been executed.
Yeah.
Just for their beliefs.
Executed. And beyond that, it's institutionalized discrimination. They're systematically barred from higher education, kicked out of government jobs, often private sector jobs too. Their property gets confiscated. It's cradle-to-grave oppression.
The novel really tries to make you understand why this specific group faces such intense persecution. What's the rationale?
It's because the Baha'i faith is seen as a direct existential ideological threat to the theocratic regime in Iran.
Why such a threat?
Because its core principles, things like the oneness of humanity, radical unity, complete gender equality, religious pluralism, the independent investigation of truth, these are seen as fundamentally revolutionary.
They undermine the very basis of the state's ideology.
Precisely. It's not viewed as just a reform of Islam. It's seen as a completely distinct alternative path that challenges the legitimacy of the ruling clergy. That makes it incredibly dangerous in their eyes.
And the novel grounds these abstract ideas in real horror. The source material mentions specific examples.
Yes, like the 1983 execution of 10 Baha'i women in Shiraz. One of them, Mona Mamunajad, was only 17 years old. Their crime, refusing to renounce their faith.
They're refusing to lie about what they believed.
That's the reality Tamina's character embodies. Her strength, her certainty, her activism, it's directly shaped by belonging to a faith that promotes the very gender equality and unity that the regime criminalizes. Her very existence, lived authentically, is an act of resistance.
Which, in the context of the novel's plot, makes her a completely plausible, high-value target for those who want to silence dissent.
Exactly. Her background isn't just color, it's integral to the threat she faces.
And this specific focus on the Baha'i situation leads naturally into the author's broader examination of women's rights in the region, a reality where women are often, as the sources put it, punished for existing outside very narrow mandated guidelines.
The facts laid out are just chilling. In Iran, mandatory hijab laws aren't trivial. They carry severe penalties, potentially even the death penalty for sustained activism against them.
And the execution numbers you mentioned.
In 2024 alone, 31 women were executed in Iran. That's the highest number in 17 years. You see public floggings like the singer Mehdi Arahi getting 74 lashes for a protest song. And incredibly, child marriage is still legal, with judges able to approve it for girls as young as 9.
9 years old. It's hard to comprehend.
And the author deliberately widens the lens beyond Iran. He points out this is a systemic issue in the region.
Right. The sources bring in Saudi Arabia.
With its strict forced guardianship system controlling women's lives.
And Pakistan.
Where estimates suggest around 1,000 honor killings happen every single year, often with impunity for the killers. Plus, widespread child marriage, often driven by poverty and deeply ingrained traditions.
So this intense documented picture of profound suffering, often lethal suffering, this sets the stage for the author's main argument, doesn't it?
Yes. This is the necessary backdrop for his most provocative critique, what he calls the paradox of selective Western feminism. Okay, this is where the political edge gets really sharp. He draws a very stark moral contrast.
He does. On one side, you have the life and death struggles we just outlined, executions, floggings, child marriage, systemic oppression.
And on the other side, he contrasts this with what he sees as a primary focus of some Western feminist discourse, the 0-15% wage gap. Now, to be clear, the critique isn't saying the wage gap isn't important. No, not at all. It's about the scale and nature of the struggle. He's highlighting the vast difference between fighting for, let's say, economic refinement or parity within a generally safe system versus fighting for basic existential survival, for the right not to be killed or imprisoned for your gender or beliefs.
He suggests focusing primarily on the 0-15% gap is a kind of luxury afforded only when those fundamental existential rights are already secure.
That's the implication. And this perceived difference in focus leads, in his view, to a kind of selective outrage. He claims that some Western voices, while vocal about domestic issues, fall silent when it comes to these kinds of atrocities abroad. Or worse, they sometimes excuse them or minimize them as just being part of cultural identity.
That's a heavy charge. Basically accusing some activists of lacking moral courage or clarity when oppression looks different or happens far away.
Yeah.
It's deliberately scathing language, yes. He argues this silence effectively betrays the women who are suffering most acutely. He has that really pointed line, "Feminism is loudest where women are safest and silent where they are broken." Oof. That's a direct challenge to the listener's conscience, isn't it? Asking you to examine where real solidarity might end and maybe performative activism begins.
It forces you to look inward, absolutely, to define for yourself what genuine moral responsibility looks like on a global scale.
And his final challenge is even more pointed. He asks us to reconsider who the real heroes and activists might be.
Exactly. He doesn't give an easy answer, but he puts the question out there. Could real feminism, or maybe just real human courage, be better represented not by the loudest voices in the West, but by, say, the Iranian men protesting alongside women, risking imprisonment or worse?
Or the journalists reporting on these abuses.
Right. He mentions the male journalists, 85 of whom are currently imprisoned, who are trying to get these stories out from dangerous places. He basically says, you decide for yourself, where true courage and costly solidarity really lie.
And Peter's journey in the novel, moving from that cynical reporter to someone who instinctively protects Temini, who feels that, forgive me, that journey becomes a kind of fictional model for this exact moral transition from observer to participant.
That's a great way to see it. His arc embodies the shift from detached critique to embodied responsibility. #outro.
So wrapping this up, the Brazilian Parrot really stands out as this masterclass in synthesis, doesn't it?
It really does. We've seen how Zayvon Vardanyan took all these different elements, the structure and pace of a screenplay, the almost scientific rigor of mathematical fidelity for depicting pain, the deep emotional grounding from using real-life prototypes.
And he fused them all together, not just as a literary exercise, but to amplify these incredibly urgent real-world issues. Persecution, moral hypocrisy, selective outrage.
Yeah, by creating characters you believe in, rooted in authentic experience, and then structuring their suffering with such Well, rigor, using that log function, for example, he forces you, the reader, to feel the stakes.
It stops being abstract.
Exactly. It stops being just news headlines from far away. It offers this powerful, emotionally resonant shortcut to understanding the complex, messy intersection of global activism, cultural conflict, and individual responsibility. It makes it personal.
And that final thought the author shared, reflecting on his whole creative journey. It was quite philosophical, but ties back so perfectly to Peter's big mistake, his recklessness.
Yeah, that definition of human drama.
He said, if something is always, but also for the first time simultaneously, then it is an error. That constant repetition of a mistake, but feeling the shock of it fresh each time. If that's the core of human drama.
It leads to a pretty potent question for all of us, doesn't it?
It really does. What error, what ingrained pattern, maybe self-destructive, maybe cynical, are you repeating in your own life? Even as it feels new or surprising each time, what pattern, if you don't confront it, might end up becoming the defining story of your life?
Wow. That's definitely something to mull over, a heavy but vital final thought.
Indeed. Thank you for diving deep with us today on this fascinating novel and its implications.